Look, it is not uncommon knowledge that I love a nostalgia trip when it comes to gaming. I can often firmly plant nostalgia goggles on and have a bloody great time doing so. And I wasn't even kind of planning on doing this video. I was actually going to put together a video exploring some of the most underrated factions of 40k. I had it all ready to go and mapped out. But I'm roughly 2 hours into playing the Sacred 2 remaster. And not only am I ready for a well-earned nap, but I feel annoyed. And now I want to talk to you about it. So I've had a look online very briefly just to see how others are feeling about this, to make sure I'm not alone. And the general vibe around the Sacred 2 remaster is it's mixed. I think that's the polite word that Yanan would use. But more honestly, it's a lot of, I think, long-time fans staring at the screen with the same expression you make when someone hands you a cup of tea that somehow is both lukewarm and looks like a puddle that your dog has just peed in. On the surface, okay, it looks nicer. This is why I fell for the offer on Steam and wasted my money. But if all you want to do is boot up Sacred 2 without hunting down ancient pitches, like you're on some sort of like archaeological dig, then the remaster technically lets you do that. Now, the problem that I have found in my mere 2 hours total of gameplay is that it's everything underneath. And now I need to moan about it. And I hope you stick around to moan about it with me. So, first bugbear of mine is that they stripped out free play, couch co-op, and weapon and relic slots. Whole bits of the original that have just evaporated. The UI feels worse, the controls feel worse, the bugs... I think I've just been saving every time I open a shop menu in case the entire thing decides to like nosedive into a crash again. The community, I don't even think the community is referring to this as review bombing, because that kind of implies that people are being dramatic about politics instead of the game. This is like thousands of Sacred players simply describing exactly what's in front of them, which is a remaster that feels unfinished, unpolished, and weirdly hollow. The devs have been silent. I really struggled to find a response when I was preparing for this video, and the issues are everywhere, from missing features to AI derping into walls, and it has the aroma of another like launch now, quietly abandoned later project. Think like Fate Reawakened, but with way more existential disappointment. Way more. Everyone wanted this to be good. Really, Sacred 2 is a product of its time. It's janky, it's charming, it's a bit feral, and the dream was to give it some love, not to strip bits out and call it a day. Had this been labelled early access, people probably would have shrugged and been like, fair, that's, keep at it, you're doing an okay job. But it wasn't. It was sold as a finished remaster. And my gosh, it is not. So yeah, it's fine. If fine means technically launches, but for a lot of long-time fans, I think Steam's refund button is doing a lot of heavy lifting right now. So I'm going to talk about, moan about, complain about my experience of the past 2 hours and time that I'm never going to get back. I think it makes sense to kind of start with, like, what is it? What is this game even about? Well, used to be a gloriously chaotic action RPG from like the late 2000s, where the plot absolutely exists, but mostly as a polite suggestion while you sprint around smashing monsters and hoovering up loot like a medieval Dyson. It's set in this world called Ancaria, which is basically a fantasy buffet. Like, you've got elves, you've got demons, you've got robots, dad jokes, weird chickens, the lot. And the story revolves around tea energy. Now, this is like a magical sci-fi substance that kind of makes everything powerful and explodey. But of course, everyone kind of wants a piece of it. And shockingly, things go horribly wrong. You pick your character class from like classical fantasy choices, because why does this robot Templar have a laser cannon and then go wandering off onto a massive open world adventure? The plot spills into light and shadow campaigns, so you basically can either save the world or lean fully into your villain era. And honestly, the narrative is less like tight and emotional storytelling and way more like go over there and hit things until they stop moving, and then enjoy the shiny loot that falls out. The real charm, though, of Sacred 2, for me anyway, is the open world. It's the ridiculous side quests, the janky humour, and the ability to kind of accidentally, like, aggro half the map because you sneezed near a goblin camp. It's goofy, it's ambitious, buggy in kind of like a nostalgic, like, it tried kind of way, and loved by fans, just because of its like messy, sprawling energy. So basically, Sacred 2 is this busy, like loot-filled fantasy ARPG about magic radiation, questionable moral decisions, and then seeing how many enemies you can run over with a giant tiger. Yeah. So let's get into it. Where did this go wrong? Right, the world kind of looks like it's being held together by chewing gum and denial. The NPCs they're wandering around like they've forgotten what legs are for. And sometimes they're accompanied by their own clones who seem like equally as confused. Now, blacksmiths just kind of stand there watching their duplicates sprint circles around them, presumably wondering which one of them is the real one, and whether this is how they go mad. Now, horses don't trot anymore, which is strange. They sort of slide across the streets, making noises that sound like someone's emptying a cutlery drawer down a flight of stairs. Objects blink in and out of existence. Characters melt into each other, and the ground occasionally decides it's optional. And this all feels like reality itself is having like a bit of a moment. And at this point, you can't help but ask yourself rather calmly, the fuck is going on with this game? Now, I've got a real soft spot for Sacred 2. I think back in the day, the thing that hooked me, and let's be honest, most of us, was the gloriously over-the-top blind guardian cameo, like a full CGI concert sequence that kind of looked like it had crawled out of a 2008 graphics card and asked if anyone fancied a pint. Now, the game itself was never what you'd call refined. I mean, it had that charming sort of chaos you'd only get when developers clearly said, that's close enough, and then shipped it anyway. It's proper, like, kind of like vintage retro, before we all pretend that was something to be proud of. Now, the remaster, though, is a different story. This isn't like, look at those quirky physics stuff. It is the kind of like catastrophic mess that does make you wonder if the code base was stored in a shed over the winter. I don't remember the original being anywhere near this tragic. Either my nostalgia has done me dirty and airbrushed out half the nightmares, or someone has taken the Sacred 2, snapped it over their knee, like Bane dealing with Batman, and then handed it back to us with a straight face. Whichever it is, the end result is unacceptable. And I kind of feel like, right, I'm just going to leave it there, end this video, go cry over my keyboard. But anyway, my grand return to this world, it kind of got off to a spectacularly crap start, quite literally on the wrong foot. Both of my characters' legs were like having what can only be described as a full existential crisis. One leg had simply just given up on life and refused to move. And the other one was just valiantly trying to tow the rest of her body across the landscape like a knackered shopping trolley. Now, my horse, like I mentioned earlier, looked even worse. All 4 of its limbs were just twitching like it had been summoned straight out of Jacob's ladder, and was deeply unhappy about the arrangement. Not exactly the triumphant homecoming that I'd kind of imagined. And then a patch arrived promising fixes. It technically addresses the legs. She now walks like a normal person rather than a VHS glitch, but everything else remained like joyfully broken. Every merchant still had like a rogue clone pacing around them like an anxious understudy. Random townsfolk were jittering about as if someone had like unplugged half their AI. Quests were just like refusing to like complete because objectives had just wandered off, evaporated, or decided they just didn't feel like being interacted with today. And then trying to remap abilities is weird because like sometimes the icons, they would get stuck on the screen afterwards, like hanging around like awkward party guests who don't realise the night is over. And the menus, like simply scrolling like the audio settings somehow mutes the entire game. No warning, no logic, just instant silence. And then if you throw in the random audio tracks that blare at you with the enthusiasm of a smoke alarm having a panic attack, the whole thing starts feeling like dangerously fragile. Every now and then the game decides to like manifest enormous like white rectangles across the screen, like it's trying to protect my eyes from whatever fresh disaster is happening underneath. And at one point, I literally couldn't sell a single item without the game locking down the rest of the inventory, as if it had suddenly developed like moral objections to like my decluttering. Now, combat arts, they're not spared from my rant either. My abilities occasionally fire off on their own, like my character is making executive decisions behind my back. Other times, they summon a completely different skill than one I had selected, which is exciting in the same way as like unlabeled medication is exciting. And sometimes they just stop working entirely, which is really helpful because consistency is just obviously for functioning software. Now, basically, any part of the combat system can fail at any moment purely because not a single piece of the game appears to have passed even the most generous version of quality control. Now, I think it's important to note that kind of everything I've mentioned so far is just a sampler platter of the wider technical carnage that is on offer. This is because the bugs aren't occasional visitors, so to speak. They are like full-time residents. It's less of like a few rough edges and more of a constant barrage of nonsense, swinging wildly between mildly amusing and genuinely sanity-eroding. Almost every time I load the game, something brand new breaks within seconds, as if simply pressing play is enough to fracture reality in some exciting way. And yes, of course, it crashes. Like, I wish I didn't have to spell that out, but I absolutely do, because I've had a lot of unreasonable amount of progress to this thing, like face planting into the desktop every other session. Half the time I forget to save because, you know, brain like a sieve, and suddenly all that time has gone. So after the last shutdown, I think my soul left my body for a moment, and I ended up here complaining about it. At this point, the whole remaster, it kind of feels like it's being held together by nothing more than sellotape, crossed fingers, and blind optimism. Despite how catastrophically unhinged this remaster is, I'm not furious. I think the dominant emotion here is more like gentle disappointment. I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. The same feeling you get when you open the fridge, fully expecting leftover takeaway, only to discover someone's eaten it and all that's left is Greek yogurt. I'm not in tears about it, but I am quietly deflated. Yeah. I think I'm more annoyed because I feel like it should have been really cool to just sit there reminiscing, but instead I'm stuck talking about what absolute mutant goblin of a release this remaster turned out to be. I can't, in good conscience, call it remastered. Is it upscaled? Probably more likely. Repaired, modernised, polished? No. It kind of looks like someone slapped a HD filter on the original, gave it a pat on the head, and then called it a day. The only real difference is the UI, and that stands out purely because it's gone from like mildly chunky to did someone design this during a train delay kind of attitude. It's genuinely impressive how much worse it looks. It's busier, it's louder, it's uglier, like a rejected Skyrim mod that was only ever downloaded by 12 people on Nexus and then promptly abandoned. And then what's that phrase? Piece de resistance? Is that the phrase? The deliberate design improvements. In a move that somehow required actual effort, the remaster has made itself less usable than its 2008 counterpart. They've cut down the quick slots for abilities and potions, reducing the number of buttons you can rely on when everything is on fire, and official reasoning is that they just want players to think more strategically. Right, okay, because nothing says strategy like fumbling around for a healing potion while your character is being pulped by a goblin with commitment issues, okay? Now, honestly, the only thing I'm thinking about is who greenlit this, and whether they're the same sort of person who insists that Jar Jar Binks wasn't the bad guy, actually. It's genuinely odd how the remaster seems to tiptoe around anything that might actually make it easier to play. It is a bit of a shame. I think underneath the chaos and the technical mayhem, you can still just about see the shape of a daft, cheerful action RPG trying its best. It is simple in the best way. Drop you into a big map, point you at the mobs wandering about like they've got lost on their way to a village fete, and then kind of let you carve through them for the sheer fun of it. There's loot files everywhere. XP pours in like someone's left the tap running. And the story is so nonsensical that your brain politely just stops asking questions. It's light, it's silly, and when it's working, there's something oddly relaxing about it. Oddly. And the humour, this is the part of the charm. The game is packed with jokes. The jokes are so stupid. They loop back around into being endearing. Random background props that make puns your dad would have been proud of. Characters break the fourth wall like it's made of wet cardboard. You know, the list goes on. To be clear, Sacred 2, it was never some hidden masterpiece. Even in its heyday, it had the structural integrity of something that lacked structural integrity, but it did have a certain like scruffy charm. It doesn't bother pretending to be deep. It shoves enemies at you, hands you shiny loot, and gives you a pat on the back for showing up. In a world where I think modern games lock half their content behind progression systems that feel like part-time jobs, playing something so gleefully straightforward, I was hoping was going to be refreshing, and if it had worked out, it would have been bloody great if the remaster didn't look like it was held together by hope and dust and whatever fell off the back of a lorry. So where does this leave us? I think after 2 hours of gameplay, it is slowly dissolving in front of me, like a budget ice lolly left on the radiator. I think it's safe to say that my nostalgia goggles have not just slipped, they've fallen off, rolled under the sofa, and are currently being chewed on by the dog. Now, I came in hoping for a cosy blast from the past, something warm and familiar, like rewatching The Fellowship of the Ring for the 900th time. And what I actually got was more like tuning into a dodgy VHS copy that someone taped over like one of those irritating daytime TV shows like Homes Under the Hammer. It's technically still there, but in a way that makes you question every decision that led you to this very point. I've complained a lot, so let's try and be positive now. I was ready to sit here, smile politely, and pretend that the remaster was charmingly rough rather than held together with a digital equivalent of chewing gum. But at some point, even I have to admit defeat. So thank you if you have stuck around for this long for my rant. I appreciate you. It's just nice to get that off my chest. Anyway, onwards and upwards. If you've got a better game recommendation, I'd really like to hear it. Drop it in the comments, and yeah, I'm only going to implore you one time to please do all those things you need to do to support my channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.